Okay, let's start with a wild idea. What if every single accident, I'm talking a car crash, a product that goes haywire, what if it all had a price tag? And what if the law wasn't really about blame, but more like a cold, hard economic calculation to figure out who pays up? Well, that's the core idea behind the economic theory of tort law. And trust me, it turns our whole concept of justice into a really fascinating math problem. And, this isn't some brand new, crazy idea. The law's been wrestling with this for decades. Way back in 1944, a judge named Roger Traynor he nailed it. He said the goal isn't just to punish someone for being careless. No, it's about figuring out who's in the best position to reduce the danger before anyone gets hurt. That's a huge shift, right? It's moving away from just pointing fingers to actually designing a system that makes all of us safer. I mean, you see this stuff all around you, every day. A fender bender on the highway, a bar fight that goes a little too far, that new gadget you bought that malfunctions and hurts someone, even a newspaper getting a story wrong and trashing someone's reputation. Some of these are intentional, sure, but a lot of them are just accidents. But here's the thing they all have in common. Someone got hurt. And that, right there, can lead you straight into a courtroom. All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll talk about what happens when things go wrong. Then, we'll get into the anatomy of a tort. After that, we dive into the really cool economic part, the price of an accident. We'll look at who pays, and finally, we'll see the law's brilliant solution, what I'm calling the Negligence Balancing Act. Okay, let's dive right into part one, when things go wrong. We're going to define the legal battlefield here. So all those examples we just talked about, they fall under this big legal umbrella called tort law. But what's really fascinating here is the economic way of looking at it. It's not just about someone doing something wrong. It's the law that governs situations where you just can't make a deal in advance. I mean, think about it. You're not going to sign a contract with every other driver on the highway about what happens if you crash, right? It's impossible. That's where tort law comes in. It's designed to handle these externalities, those costs that spill over and affect people who weren't part of any deal. Okay, so how does a lawsuit like this actually work? What do you need to prove? That brings us to part two, the anatomy of a tort. A plaintiff can't just walk into court and say, "Hey, I was wronged. Give me money." No, you have to prove three essential ingredients. And here they are, the big three. First, harm. You've got to show you actually suffered a loss. Simple, right? Second, cause. You have to prove the other person's action is what caused your harm. And third, breach of duty. This means they had some kind of legal duty to you and they failed. Now here's the key. Under a negligence rule, you need all three. You miss one, just one, and your whole case can completely fall apart. All right, let's zoom in on that first element, harm. From an economist's point of view, harm is basically a downward shift in your well-being, your happiness, your bottom line, what they call utility. So the theoretical goal of a lawsuit is something called perfect compensation. The idea is to use money to put the victim back to the exact same level of satisfaction they had before the accident. A beautiful idea, but yeah, in the real world, that is much, much easier said than done. Next up, we have cause. And let me tell you, this is where things can get really tricky. The law has this specific idea called proximate cause. See, it's not enough for someone's action to be just one little domino in a super long chain of events. No, it has to be a direct, primary, and foreseeable cause of the harm. The courts are trying to find the main event that triggered the damage, not just some random thing that happened way back in the chain. And that brings us to the third element, breach of duty. And this is where the road splits, basically. On one path, you've got strict liability. This is for super dangerous stuff, like using dynamite. If you cause harm doing that, you're liable. End of story. But most cases go down the other path, negligence. And this adds a game-changing ingredient, fault. This is huge because it means a defendant can actually get off the hook if they can prove they were being reasonably careful. Okay, so that's the legal framework, the rules of the game. Now, let's get to the economic heart of this whole thing. This is part three, the price of an accident. And the goal here from an economic standpoint isn't just about making one victim whole again. It's much bigger. It's about minimizing the total cost of accidents for all of society. So how do we calculate that social cost? Well, let's break it down. Component number one is the cost of precaution. This is all the money and effort you spend to prevent an accident from happening in the first place. Driving a little slower, buying better tires, installing safety gear. The more care you take, we'll call that X, the more it's going to cost you. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, the second part of the equation is the flip side of that coin, the expected harm. This is just common sense, really. The more precaution you take, X, the lower the probability of an actual accident happening. So the expected cost of the harm is just that probability multiplied by how bad the accident would be. We'll call that cost A. So as your precaution goes up, this expected harm cost goes down. So here's where it all comes together. The total social cost is just these two things added up: the cost of being careful plus the expected cost of the accident if it happens. You've got these two costs pushing in opposite directions. And the whole goal of the legal system, when you look at it through this economic lens, is to find the sweet spot. It's to get people to choose a level of care that makes that total social cost as low as it can possibly be. It's basically a giant optimization problem. Okay, which brings us to the absolute core question in all of this, in part 4. Who pays for the harm? Because believe me, how the law answers that question changes everything. It completely shapes how people behave. At the end of the day, it's all about creating the right incentives. And this is where we run into a really interesting paradox. Just look at this. If the rule is no liability, the person who might cause the accident has zero reason to be careful, right? Why would they? They never have to pay. But the potential victim has every reason in the world to be careful. Now let's flip it. What about strict liability, where the injurer always pays? Well, now the injurer is super motivated to be careful. But the victim? If they know they're going to get a check no matter what, their economic incentive to be careful just disappears. See the problem? Neither of these simple rules gets both people to be careful. So, how does the law solve this puzzle? What's the clever way out of this paradox? Well, that brings us to our final section, the Negligence Balancing Act. And let me tell you, it is a truly elegant solution. Here's how it works. A negligence rule does something brilliant. It doesn't just say you pay. It sets a standard of care, that sweet spot, that efficient level we were talking about. And here's the magic trick. If you, the potential injurer, meet that standard, you are not liable, even if an accident still happens. This creates an incredibly powerful incentive. You'll spend just enough to hit that legal standard, because spending any less means you risk paying for the whole accident, and spending any more is just wasting money. And the victim? They know this. So they also have an incentive to be careful, because if the other guy met the standard, they're stuck with their own bills. And, of course, the law isn't one size fits all. It has different flavors of this negligence rule to fine-tune the balance. You've got simple negligence. Was the injurer at fault? That's it. Then you have rules that look at the victim too, like contributory negligence. A big one today is comparative negligence, where you basically split the bill based on how much at fault each person was. They're all just different tools in the toolbox, trying to get to that same efficient outcome. And all this leads to a pretty startling conclusion that economists discovered. It turns out that if you assume perfect conditions, the court gets the compensation amount exactly right and sets the standard of care perfectly, it actually doesn't matter which of these negligence rules you pick. Every single one of them, from simple to comparative, gives both the injurer and the victim the exact same incentive to be efficiently careful. They call it the equivalence result, and it just goes to show how powerful and consistent this underlying economic logic really is. So at the end of the day, this way of looking at the law, it isn't really about right and wrong, is it? It's about math. It's about designing an incentive system that treats accidents like a problem to be optimized. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Does seeing the cold economic logic humming away behind the scenes, does that change how you think about justice?